The clock on the dashboard glowed 7:58 a.m. as Marcus Tate pulled his weathered sedan into the parking lot of the Willow Creek Courthouse in northern Georgia. The early autumn air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and damp earth from the surrounding forest. Marcus adjusted his rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of his own tired eyes, brown, deep-set, and framed by lines earned through years of sleepless nights. He smoothed his charcoal gray suit, a hand-me-down from his older brother, and exhaled a steadying breath. Today wasn't supposed to be anything extraordinary, just a routine appearance to contest a minor traffic citation, but Marcus knew better than to take any day in a courtroom lightly. As a public defender with 8 years of experience, Marcus had built a reputation in Atlanta's legal circles for his tenacity and unshakable calm. He'd spent his career representing those who couldn't afford high-priced attorneys, often taking on cases others deemed unwinnable. But this morning, he wasn't the lawyer, he was the defendant. 2 weeks prior, a sheriff's deputy had pulled him over on a winding back road, claiming Marcus had run a stop sign Marcus knew didn't exist. The ticket carried a $200 fine, but it wasn't the money that bothered him. It was the principle. He'd requested dashcam footage through a public records request, only to be told it was unavailable. Something about the encounter, the deputy's smug tone, the way he'd lingered by Marcus's window, felt off. So here he was, ready to fight. Marcus grabbed his leather satchel, stuffed with notes and a printed map of the intersection, and stepped out into the morning light. The courthouse loomed ahead, a squat brick building with ivy creeping up its walls. Its faded grandeur hinted at a time when Willow Creek had been more than a sleepy rural outpost. As he climbed the steps, his phone buzzed. A text from his paralegal, Lena, Judge Hargrove's presiding today. Old school. Doesn't like surprises. Good luck. Marcus smirked. He'd faced tougher than Hargrove. Inside, the courthouse smelled of polished wood and stale coffee. The lobby hummed with quiet activity, farmers in overalls clutching paperwork, a young couple whispering about a custody dispute, a clerk shuffling files behind a glass window. Marcus checked the docket posted on the wall, Room 3, 8:30 a.m. He glanced at his watch, 8:12. Plenty of time. He navigated the narrow hallway, his polished shoes clicking against the linoleum, and slipped into Room 3. The courtroom was small but packed, with creaky wooden benches occupied by a mix of locals. Marcus took a seat near the back, scanning the room. Judge Hargrove hadn't arrived yet, but the bailiff, a burly man with a graying mustache, stood by the door, eyeing the crowd. Marcus opened his satchel, reviewing his evidence, a photo of the intersection, a statement from a gas station clerk who'd seen the stop, and a timeline of the incident. He was ready. At 8:30 sharp, the bailiff called, "All rise." The room shuffled to its feet as Judge Amos Hargrove entered. He was a wiry man in his late 60s, with a hawkish nose and a shock of white hair that seemed to defy gravity. His black robe swished as he took his seat behind the bench, peering over wire-rimmed glasses at the assembled crowd. "Be seated," he barked, his voice gravelly but commanding. Marcus sat, noting the judge's sharp gaze sweeping the room like a predator sizing up prey. Hargrove wasted no time, plowing through the docket with ruthless efficiency. A farmer contesting a fence line dispute. A teenager caught speeding. A woman late on her property taxes. Each case was dispatched with a curt ruling, no fuss, no fanfare. Marcus watched, gauging Hargrove's style, strict, impatient, and prone to cutting off long-winded explanations. Noted. At 8:47, Marcus's name echoed through the room, Marcus Tate. He rose, smoothing his tie, and approached the podium with a steady stride. Hargrove barely looked up from his papers. "Traffic citation, failure to stop." "How do you plead?" "Not guilty, Your Honor," Marcus said, his voice clear and even. "I have evidence to present." "You're late," Hargrove interrupted, his eyes narrowing as he finally looked at Marcus. "Court started at 8:30. You think you can waltz in here whenever you please? Marcus blinked, caught off guard. Your Honor, I was here before 8:30. I've been seated in the back since 8:12. Hargrove leaned forward, his lips curling into a thin sneer. Don't play games with me, boy. I didn't see you when I walked in. That makes you late in my courtroom. The word boy landed like a slap, and a murmur rippled through the room. Marcus felt the heat rise in his chest, but he kept his expression neutral. With respect, Your Honor, he began, I was present and accounted for. If I may. You may not, Hargrove snapped, banging his gavel. This court runs on order. You disrespect that, you pay the price. I'm fining you $500 for contempt, on top of the $200 for the ticket. Case dismissed. The room went still. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. Your Honor, I'd like to appeal that ruling. And I'd like to present my evidence on the citation. Appeal all you want, Hargrove said, waving a dismissive hand. Take it up with the clerk. Next case. The gavel slammed again, ending the exchange. Marcus stepped back, his mind racing. The fine, $700 total, was absurd, punitive, and clearly personal. He glanced around the room. A white man in a flannel shirt who'd arrived after 8:30 had just argued a parking ticket and walked away with a warning. A woman in a sundress, late by 10 minutes, had paid a $50 fine with no lecture. The disparity was glaring, and Marcus wasn't the only one who noticed. An older black woman in the front row met his gaze, her eyes sharp with understanding. As he returned to his seat, Marcus pulled out a notepad and began writing, every word Hargrove had said, every detail of the morning. This wasn't over. He'd come to fight a ticket, but now he was fighting something bigger. The courtroom buzzed on, oblivious to the storm brewing in Marcus Tate's mind. He wasn't just a defendant anymore. He was a witness. And soon, he'd be something else entirely. Marcus drove back to Atlanta that afternoon, the hum of the highway blending with the storm of thoughts in his head. The $700 fine stung, but it was the judge's tone, the casual venom in boy, the smug dismissal, that gnawed at him. He'd seen bias before, in client stories and courtroom transcripts, but experiencing it firsthand was a different beast. By the time he pulled into his apartment complex, the sun was dipping below the skyline, painting the city gold. He grabbed his satchel and headed inside, determined to turn anger into action. His one-bedroom apartment was a sanctuary of organized chaos, law books stacked on the coffee table, case files spilling from a desk in the corner, a framed photo of his parents beaming on the wall. Marcus dropped his satchel and fired up his laptop. If Hargrove thought this was the end, he was sorely mistaken. Marcus opened a blank document and began typing a detailed account of the morning, times, names, rulings, everything. Then he pulled up the Willow Creek Courthouse website, searching for records on Hargrove. Amos Hargrove had been a judge for 32 years, a fixture in rural Georgia's legal system. Public records showed a long career but little scrutiny, no major scandals, no formal complaints that stuck. Marcus frowned. That didn't mean there was nothing to find, it just meant no one had looked hard enough. He texted Lena, need everything you can dig up on Judge Amos Hargrove, cases, rulings, complaints, anything off the record. ASAP. Her reply came fast, on it. You okay? He typed back, I will be. Over the next few days, Marcus turned his apartment into a war room. Lena delivered a stack of files, court transcripts, local news clippings, even a grainy photo of Hargrove shaking hands with a sheriff at a county fair. Patterns emerged. Hargrove's fines skewed higher for black defendants, often double or triple those for white ones in similar cases. Warnings were rare for minorities but common for others. Complaints had been filed, 5 in the last decade, but all were dismissed by a judicial oversight board stacked with Hargrove's peers. Marcus leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. This wasn't just one bad day. It was a system. He reached out to colleagues, quietly asking about Hargrove. A friend from law school, now a prosecutor in Macon, shared a story. He chewed out a black attorney for disrespect last year, same vibe you got. Guy didn't push back, though. Hargrove's untouchable out there. Marcus thanked him and hung up, his resolve hardening. Untouchable didn't mean invincible. On Friday, Marcus drove back to Willow Creek, this time with a plan. He'd filed an appeal on the contempt fine and requested a hearing, but he wasn't waiting for that. He stopped at the gas station near the intersection where he'd been ticketed. The clerk, a wiry man named Earl with a salt and pepper beard, remembered him. "Yeah, I saw that deputy pull you over," Earl said, leaning on the counter. "No stop sign there." "Never has been. He's been working that stretch for months, nabbing folks." Marcus handed him a notepad. "Would you write that down and sign it?" Earl nodded, scribbling his statement. Next, Marcus visited the courthouse clerk's office, requesting records of traffic citations from that road over the past year. The clerk, a nervous young woman with glasses, hesitated. "Judge Hargrove doesn't like us handing out too much," she whispered. Marcus smiled. "It's public record, ma'am. I'm just asking for what's mine to see." She relented, printing a thick stack of documents. Back in his car, he pored over them, dozens of tickets, mostly black and Latino drivers, all for failure to stop at an intersection with no sign. The deputy's name, R. Callahan, appeared on every one. That night, Marcus sat at his desk, piecing it together. Hargrove wasn't just a biased judge, he was part of something bigger, a racket, maybe, with the sheriff's department. Fines funneled money to the county, and Hargrove's courtroom was the hammer. Marcus's ticket wasn't random, it was a cog in the machine. He typed up his findings, his fingers flying over the keys. This wasn't about $700 anymore. It was about justice. By Monday, he had a draft complaint ready for the Georgia Judicial Qualifications Commission, backed by data, Earl's statement, and his own testimony. He emailed it to Lena for review, then leaned back, staring at the photo of his parents. His father, a mechanic, and his mother, a schoolteacher, had raised him to stand tall. "You don't back down when it's right," his father used to say. Marcus nodded to himself. He wouldn't. The appeal hearing was set for a crisp October morning, 2 weeks after Marcus's first encounter with Hargrove. He arrived at Willow Creek Courthouse at 7:45 a.m., early enough to leave no room for accusations. The courtroom felt different this time, less crowded, but heavier with anticipation. Word had spread about Marcus's clash with Hargrove, and a handful of locals lingered in the benches, whispering. Marcus took his seat, his satchel now bulging with evidence, not just for his case, but for the bigger fight brewing. Hargrove entered at 8:30, his expression sour as he spotted Marcus. "Tate appeal," he growled, skipping formalities. "Let's make this quick." Marcus stood, approaching the podium with calm precision. "Your Honor, I'm appealing the $500 contempt fine from September 24th. I was not late, as documented by my arrival time and witnesses in the room. I also contest the original citation, as there's no stop sign at the cited location." Hargrove's eyes narrowed. "You're wasting my time, Tate. I ruled on this. Pay the fine and move on." "With respect, Your Honor," Marcus said, laying out his photos and Earl's statement, "the evidence shows no stop sign exists. The citation's invalid, and the contempt charge lacks basis. I've also compiled records showing a pattern of disproportionate fines in this court, particularly against minorities." He slid the stack of traffic citations across the podium. "This suggests systemic bias, which I've reported to the Judicial Qualifications Commission." The room went silent. Hargrove's face reddened, his gavel trembling in his hand. You dare accuse me of misconduct, he roared. I've run this court fairly for decades. I'm presenting facts, Your Honor, Marcus replied, unflinching. The data speaks for itself. So do the people you fined unjustly. He glanced at the benches, where the older black woman from his first day nodded subtly. Hargrove banged his gavel. You're out of line. I'll have you disbarred for this insolence. Marcus held up a hand. That's not your call, Your Honor. But there's more you should know. He reached into his satchel and pulled out a badge, not a lawyer's ID, but a gold-embossed shield. I'm not just a public defender. I'm also a special investigator with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, assigned to audit rural court systems for corruption. I've been watching Willow Creek for months. The twist landed like a thunderclap. Hargrove froze, his mouth half open. The bailiff shifted uncomfortably. Gasps rippled through the room. Marcus had kept this secret close, a dual role he'd taken on after suspecting corruption in outlying counties. His ticket had been the perfect chance to test Hargrove's court up close. I've got enough here, Marcus continued, to trigger a state inquiry, fines, fabricated citations, collusion with Sheriff Callahan. This ends today. He placed the badge on the podium, letting its weight sink in. Hargrove slumped back, his bravado crumbling. You can't prove any of this, he stammered. I already have, Marcus said. The GBI's on its way. You'll have your chance to explain. The hearing dissolved into chaos as Marcus stepped back. Hargrove barked orders, but his authority had evaporated. Outside, Marcus called his GBI supervisor, confirming the raid. By noon, agents swarmed the courthouse, seizing records. Hargrove was suspended pending investigation, and Callahan was pulled in for questioning. Marcus stood on the steps, watching justice unfold, a quiet fire in his chest. Months later, Marcus sat in his Atlanta office, sunlight streaming through the window. The Willow Creek case had exploded, Hargrove resigned in disgrace, Callahan was indicted for falsifying tickets, and the county faced a class-action lawsuit from dozens of wronged residents. Marcus's name was in the headlines, but he didn't linger on the praise. He was back to his public defender work, prepping for a client's hearing, when Lena knocked. Mail for you, she said, handing him an envelope. Inside was a letter from the older woman from the courtroom, Clara Evans, a retired nurse. Thank you, Mr. Tate. I sat in that court for years, watching unfairness pile up. You gave us a voice. Clipped to it was a check refunding his $700 fine, courtesy of the county's settlement. Marcus smiled, tucking the letter into his desk. That evening, he drove to his parents' house for dinner. His father clapped him on the back. Told you, stand tall, and the world bends. His mother hugged him, whispering, I'm proud. As he left, Marcus stopped at the gas station where Earl worked. Heard you're a hero now, Earl said, grinning. Marcus shrugged. Just doing my job. Back home, he stood at his window, gazing at the city lights. The fight wasn't over, other courts, other Hargroves waited, but Marcus was ready. He'd turned a $200 ticket into a reckoning, not just for himself, but for everyone who'd been silenced. And in that victory, he found not just justice, but purpose.